Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I'm here again with my friend.
Bill McKenna.
Hey, Bill McKenna. And we have a special episode for you. And this one is based on a dear friend of ours wrote an amazing book that talks about three elements of success. And they're three elements of success that are not things people generally think about, right, Bill? What are they?
Well, these three elements, I want to back up for just 1 second. This particular person that we know works with every superstar that you know. And I mean the biggest names. Uh, I love to call it the shortest book that was ever written in Hollywood, the people he has not worked with. So um, he is actually really smart guy. And he came up with, over time, what makes a person successful in the business. And he came up with three really interesting things. The first one was talent. Now, everybody knows that, right? You want to be a rock and roll singer. You want to be like, the best actor, most sought after. You need talent. The second thing that was brought up was character. Very interesting, you know. Uh, the when he was talking about this, he was basically saying you can have very short-term success, but if you want to be a superstar, that means you're in a lot of gigs. You're playing to audit, stadiums. You have some staying power. And the third one, interesting, is likability. So those are the three components of being a superstar. Now, I found it so very, very curious because he's seen them come, he's seen them go, he's seen them fall, rise and fall. And he broke down the individual components. So, what I'll do is I'll start with character and the stories around character. Well, the first one is that if a person has a character flaw, and by flaw, what I mean is that, let's say that they have a penchant for ripping people off, not, keeping deals, that they make a deal and they don't actually keep it. Well, in this particular circumstance, you might be tremendously talented, you might be likable. You know, there's narcissists out there who are very likable. They know how to manipulate. They're certainly often attractive. That's one of the characteristics, especially with the female narcissist. They got it going on with the looks. And if they don't, they'll figure out how to make it good. So, so you've got a situation here where things will crumble. He mentioned there was one person that was a young girl who was extremely talented and very likable. And because her music was so good, she ended up getting right into the CEO's office of the biggest music company out there. But then what happened? She showed up late. Showed up late. That was it. And this was actually one of her character flaws. She couldn't be on time. And that was the end of that. So this type of thing sounds, oh my gosh, like that's awfully severe, especially for somebody so very talented. But for the real success, you need to have all three. There are a lot of people out there that are extremely driven, and they are not only are they driven, but they're also ethical and likable. But they simply don't have the talent. And then, you have other examples out there of people who have lots of talent, and they're ethical, but they're simply not very likable, not very likable at all. So there was one of the things I thought about right before this episode was, Van Halen. Who was that? You remember that song? I think it's David Lee Roth. I think he was in Van Halen, right?
I wouldn't know.
Oh my gosh, you wouldn't know. Oh, yes, gosh, I'm dating myself. Okay, so back in the day, we'll have a history lesson. Back in the 80s, there was this band called Van Halen, extremely popular. And the lead singer, I believe, was David Lee Roth. Now, David, holy cow, extremely talented, and to the external audience, very likable. Now, David was also into martial arts, and he might have enjoyed, shall we say, partying. Anyway, that those kind of things ultimately lead to brain injury. And when you look at him, if you go and look at him, you can actually see one of his eyeballs is ibidi. There's one's higher than the other. It's very, very clear there's a brain injury. It's one of the signs of it. If you look at a person and they got the eyes are off, you have a brain injury. So a lot of times these things that appear as a character flaw are simply nothing but a concussion. Little boys, this happens to all the time. You're just a misbehaving little guy, rambunctious, misbehaving. But if you go back, and look at it, oftentimes there was a concussion. And because, there's, the kid bumped their head and they're like, oh yeah, they just went to sleep. I think they're a little tired tonight. Well, actually, an untreated concussion is just that. And it has everything to do with anger, uncontrolled emotion. You lose the ability to regulate your emotion. You lose the ability to focus. Many, many other things happen.
Bill, that makes me think. You hear these stories about these high level stars, and some of them are notorious for exactly that, flying off the handle, being really, really difficult to work with. And what's interesting about that is that these careers are highly sought after. There's a lot of money involved, there's a lot of prestige, there's a lot of fame, and they want to keep them. But some of them get themselves to the point where they are not hireable because nobody wants to work with them. So the reason I'm putting that out is nobody really wants to act like that. I mean, occasionally, like you mentioned, a narcissist where they may do that just for attention, but for the average person, they really don't love that about themselves, that they flip out and create a scene for everybody else, or do a lot of shame and guilt after that. Plus, people just don't like you. So it's one of those things that when we know that a head injury, and there's more than just a bump on the head, we'll talk about a few of those things, that create this situation of flying off the handle, bad behavior. If we can have compassion for that, understanding that maybe it's simply the effect of a head injury, and now we know that we can make adjustments to the body in a way that'll make that head injury not be interrupting the natural flow, the person's natural personality, their energy, their mental acuity, so that they can behave normally again. And I think if we start to look at these people differently in that way, we might be able to create greater change for everyone just by having a little bit of knowledge and some compassion for it.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And it's a whole different point of view. I love the way Dr. Daniel Amen says it. He's looking, to have the end of mental illness. These traumas that we have and head injuries, they look the same on the brain scans that he does. And because of the several 100,000 brain scans, he's been able to determine all these things that we thought were innocuous, a few drinks a week, a couple of cigarettes, or, some other drugs. Oh, yeah, it wasn't a big deal. All of these things actually have an effect that you can actually get a scan and find out.
What I think is so interesting about this, Bill, is that there's a lot of things that we would call, I was thinking back to what you said, success, character, and likability. We call it a character flaw, right? They just flip out. They can't show up on time. They can't remember the things they're not taking responsibility for things, that sort of stuff we would say is a character flaw, and things that kind of make other people opt out of relationships, including business relationships with that person. And it makes me wonder how many of those character flaws that we're talking about really are actually some form of head injury. We were talking the other day, you and I, about teenage years, and how for so many of us is considered these terrible teenage years. Your kid hates you all of a sudden. They don't want to talk to you. They won't go to school. They want to dress weird. So we always attributed it to hormones. There's a lot of things that happen in that time frame, and one big one is dental work and braces, which act like a concussion to the head. We don't think about this, but this thing that we call our skull cradles this super, super sensitive computing system, the most advanced one that anyone knows of, right here in this head, right? And we're doing all these things in regular everyday life that bonk that thing around, that knock it around, that create tension on it, that create different pressures, right? Including things like braces. So during that time, if you're having teeth pulled, that's like a concussion to the head. We're moving the whole skull around, yanking things out of it. If you play sports where you get hit in the head, if you have braces, also moving the facial bones, that skull, that delicate little cavity for the supercomputer. All of those things can create changes that look like a character problem, a character flaw. How amazing for parents and families if they knew it was just that. Looks like maybe we need to make an adjustment there to rearrange, reorganize the way the brain and the body are talking to each other, and relieve maybe the pressure that's happening to that, that delicate little capsule that houses our head. So I know it's an aside, but just really a thought about what really is character and what really is a character flaw, especially when it shows up at certain times of life.
Yeah, it is interesting that oftentimes it starts in early childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And it just becomes kind of you. I've always been the same. It's little bad bastard Billy, and that's how he is. and it doesn't matter how many years go by. And there's a real interesting thing about that. And that is that part of the brain that got affected by the emotional or physical trauma goes literally offline. The blood no longer flows there, which we can actually see in these SPECT scans by Dr. Daniel Amen. And so hence, it is part of the brain that the perspective, a different perspective, is simply not available. Even something as quite as simple as the downfall of the progression a person goes through with alcohol. When somebody is drinking over an extended period of time, what happens is the prefrontal cortex, the front of the brain that regulates, you know what, maybe I should stop now, maybe I shouldn't do that, literally goes offline. And eventually the blood just stops flowing there. You literally lose that discretion. And with it, many other things. The executive function in your brain, the higher decision making capacities. The point is that it's really not their fault. Yeah. I know it feels like their fault, but they're literally, it's like your arm got chopped off. Hey, I'd like to use my left arm, but I don't got one. It's so I mean, there obviously I'm a big fan of personal responsibility, but I guess some compassion and understanding for what it is. And it goes along with so many of the other things.
I think the biggest thing, Bill, is it's a place to look. It's a place for people who are having that problem themselves, or families who are having that problem with someone else, to look. That with Cognomovement is quite simple to resolve. I think that's the thing that's important about it, is now you have somewhere to be like, okay, maybe let's check here and see if this is resolvable. Let's take our first break and hear from our good sponsors, and we will be right back. Hey, everybody, it's Liz. Are you ready to make the biggest change of your entire life this year, this summer? It's a year of so much upheaval, so much change, so much movement, that it's the perfect time for you to take advantage of all that energy moving and really make the biggest change of your life. Join us this September for our Cogno Conscious event. We'll change you from the inside out. You'll change your perspective. You'll change the way the world looks to you. And miraculously, you're going to change the way the world reacts to you. Join us at cognomovement.com, upcoming events, and buy your tickets now for the Cogno Conscious event in September. It will sell out quickly. And we're back. We're talking about the three areas that a person needs to have really big success. And it's talent. That's one. Character, which we've been talking about. Likability. So let's do this, Bill. Let's continue our conversation into likability. And in the last segment, let's talk about talent, because there's a way to use our work to even improve that as well. Talent's one of those things you think you need to have inherently. Maybe not. Let's talk about likability. Likability is one of those things that you feel like you also have it or not. I mean, it's almost as elusive as talent. But what it really is has so much to do with a person's nervous system. When you come into contact with somebody that is just really likable, you know it instantly. You barely even have to talk to them. It's just like, dang, it is great hanging out with this person. There's such easy rapport. They seem like they can talk to anybody and about anything a lot of times, right? So what is it? And if you don't have it, why not? So let's break it down a little bit. I'll start with the first part. Why do I say it's the nervous system? Because every relationship, every person you come in contact with, you're really coming in contact with their nervous system setup. Some people's nervous system, you walk 10 feet near them and it feels like they punch you right in the face. You know, people like that? I do. And they say, I don't know what it is, but people don't seem to like me. What it is they have their most predominant emotion is highly likely some sort of fear and protective pattern. And literally, their nervous system wants to punch you in the face. It wants to keep you at a distance enough so you can't hurt them. They seem like possibly an aggressive person, but they're often the most vulnerable human. They're the kind of people that the people who really know them very well love them dearly and don't understand why other people don't see it. But it really is this pattern that when people just come up to them, they don't feel welcomed in, they don't feel embraced, they feel pushed right back. Now, the person who is very, very likable tends not to have that. They tend to be a little more gregarious. They tend to not have that concern or fear that people are going to hurt them. So they let people in. They generally tend to feel easy to be around. It's a nervous system setup. And if that's true, then it's changeable. It is absolutely changeable by changing the most predominant pattern in the system. So what do you have to say about that, Bill?
Well, it has to do with everything you said and some other things, like where the attention is in the body. So for most of us, our attention is literally up in our heads. You literally, when you think about, hey, where are you? If I asked you right now, where are you? If you were to choose a place in your body that you are, almost everybody's going to tell you, I'm right here. I'm up in my head. My body's just carrying me around with that. Now, there are some here who are in their heart. And with this, it creates a massive field. The ancients, the in the East, they had these defined centers of your body, and it wasn't only there, obviously, all around the world. Everybody's always talked about their heart, being in their heart. In the East, they call it your heart chakra. So this heart area, one of the very interesting things that they knew, because they knew, depending upon the location of your attention, wherever that is, where your tension in your body, and if this area is really felt, what's going to end up happening is that, particularly in the heart, that you become irresistible. Meaning fame is almost inevitable. Matter of fact, people that are in their heart will be overwhelmed with attention, and they try to back people off. I know people that are there in their heart, and literally what they are like, oh, no, 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 no cameras, no, no, no. They literally know that they can be famous at any time they want, but they don't want it. People are constantly inviting them to parties. They're like, please come, you're the only fun one. Everyone can feel that good feeling when you're around. Now, I don't know if I've told this story before, but I guess I can empathize with everyone out there who is not feeling that. Because I spent the first well over half my life, probably more than half of my life, in a state of, fear and anger. And and with that, I would I would get an appropriate response. One of those responses was children in strollers. Now, I have a very big family, a very big family. I got 12 brothers and sisters. So you can imagine how many, children, there's always a kid on the way. Somebody's always having a kid. That's just the immediate family. But I would go up to strollers. I wouldn't say a word or anything, just like, why? And the kid would always cry. Always. It was like, and these are kids too young to talk, right? And so, actually it got to the point where, like I was like, kind of like, oh my gosh, this is, almost an amusement, like, you know, although later when I kind of, for lack of a better term, went through a transition, I found myself uh, uh, in a waiting room at an airport, and there was a kid, and he probably somewhere around one, that real young, like toddlerish, year to year and a half, can walk, but barely, that type of thing. And there was a mother, a father, and another little kid. There were a family. And the kid was on the mother's lap, and he was just squirming around and everything. And I kind of made me, because I was kind of thought it was funny. It's like, he's all and I just kind of smiled, and the mother said to me, I don't know this woman. I don't know their family. She goes, "You want them?" And I said, "Yes." And I opened my arms. That kid squiggled off his mom's lap, ran across to me, jumped up on my chest, and put his head on my heart. And then he lifted his head up and looked at me in the eyes, and then put his head back down, and then again looked up and put his head back down. And the mother and father were like, "What the?" And I was, there's no one in the room more shocked than me. Not my world. But it was the evidence for me, of all things, changed. And this energy, this feeling, is felt by all the people around you, and it is the reason behind the popularity. You get around one of these super famous or very popular person, you're like, "Oh yeah, breath of fresh air. Oh, it's exciting and happy and good." So anyway, this seems like you either got it or you don't. But that is kind of the old reality. There is another reality, right, Liz?
Yeah, we used to think that, you either got it or you don't. But it isn't true anymore. If a person knows how to shift into that heart-centered space, it turns out it's actually quite easy as well. That likability thing turns on. I just want to verify something you said. My dad and my husband my dad's gone, but they have this very similar sense about them. They're very, very heart-centered, very loving humans. Now, both super manly men, right? They're guys, but they are very, very heart-centered, and they are like a baby magnet. My dad, babies would just run up to him and want to climb up in his arms. And one time my husband was at my nephew's baseball game, and he was kind of sitting by himself. And this 4-year-old girl kept coming up and sitting next to him. And the family, was a bleacher away, and he's looking at them like, what is happening? Pretty soon she wanted to hold his hand. Pretty soon she wanted to sit in his lap. And he's like, he couldn't let her sit in his lap. I mean, not in this day and age. He didn't know them, and he's kind of looking like, someone help me. But kids are like that. They're just drawn, and they're drawn to that heart-centered, it's a form of kindness or lovingness that just emanates from the human. Now, some people just happen to be born that way, but those of us who are not and want to, you can try simply shifting your attention into your heart, letting it radiate from there with some kind of an open, loving feeling, and you watch. People want to talk to you. People want to be a part of what you're doing. And little kids and pets tend to be drawn to you. It's an amazing thing. All right, let's take our next break. We'll hear from our good sponsors. When we come back, let's talk about talent. This one might be very surprising to people. Okay, we're back. We're talking about the fact that likability actually can be shifted by moving into the heart center.
But this is, it's important that all things are considered. There are people that are extremely likable and they got no talent, and they also don't have any character.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen like a pickpocket?
Yeah.
A pickpocket who you're like, you have a hard time getting mad at the little guy because you just like him. Just damn it, give me back my wallet, you little, But there are people that are extremely likable that lack the other two.
Yeah, you're right.
In all of these things, there's each one, right? You need the other aspect.
Well, and there's a caveat with this one. Talent is incredibly and completely subjective. Case in point, music and art. Go take a look at a really high-end art gallery and ask yourself, that's talent? Think about Cat Stevens and how odd sounding he was. Think about Willie Nelson. Not particularly like the best singer on the planet, right? Very subjective. But there's something about both that draws you in. Cat Stevens, it's so hard to watch him in his old videos. The way he moved was so weird. But there is something about him as a human, and the way he sings so raw and so interesting. So talent is ultimately subjective. So who gets to decide, right? However, if you're a very charismatic person with a lot of character, you can fake talent. You really can. However, that's not the point I intended to make, but it's true. It is true. There are a lot of people who get famous who just really don't have a lot of talent, as far as I'm concerned, but somebody else thinks they do. Right? There's people who are comedians who I do not think are funny at all. Other people think they're hilarious, right? Songs that I'm thinking, what? That is not music. And other people love it. So that one is very subjective. However, let's say that there's an area that you would like to be more talented in, but you're not. Let's take music, for example. If you know how to shift into the right place in your brain, the right hemisphere in your brain, you can actually increase your ability to do that specific thing, like sing, like play an instrument, maybe memorize lines and act, maybe have more confidence. If you have access to your whole brain, left and right. So acting, a lot of times a person has to be quite emotionally intelligent in a certain way to be able to emote in a way that other people can believe. But in acting, what you really have to be is an excellent liar. An excellent liar, which takes some intelligence. So harmonizing the left and right side of the brain allows you to tap into emotion, as well as have the cunning to figure out how to pull off what's a great imposter, right? Music, in terms of like playing an instrument, you can make yourself ambidextrous by having harmony and grasp over your left and right side of the brain, being able to use both hands in a much better way to play piano, to play the guitar, right? To learn those things. But one thing a lot of people say is I have a hard time learning. It doesn't come naturally. But if you know how to move your eyes and get your brain harmonized, that becomes much, much easier. Learning a language, that's true of as well. So I would say out of all the three, talent is probably the easiest one. What it really takes is a real drive. Like you have to be extraordinarily certain that you are going to be doing that thing enough that other people are like, oh yeah, they're a great artist, or they're a great singer, or oh, look at them, they're a great actor. It's a lot more about a decision within yourself, which I think is very, very interesting. A certainty that you are that thing, which goes back to the nervous system again, emitting that. That's another brain harmonization combined with predominant emotion. I mean, I've known people that are absolute terrible at something, and yet everybody's like, dang, they're good. But they have a lot of charisma, a lot of personality, and extraordinary persistence. You ever known anybody like that?
Well, Elton John. Elton John, he's very known to be as tenacious. He is tenacious as the day is long. And this kind of goes back to that character. These people that reach stardom and maintain it, these success levels, they are driven for, they can't even explain why they are so driven. They just are. It is part of their character. So that aspect is extremely important. But it definitely needs to be combined with the others. Now, one of the things that you will find the strangest thing that could happen related to talent, and that is of the phenomenon of mirroring. When you are an emitter of this love feeling, this charisma, people get a good feeling and they look for the evidence to support their good feeling. So I love this guy. I love this guy. And this guy, throws a few colors on a palette and, he's, the canvas. And, I feel so good around him. I like this. Oh, yes, I love those guys. Wow, look at him.
It's like,
yes, so good,
it's so bad, but they'll be like, oh, well, he must be so high-minded, so intelligent that we just can't understand it. So bravo.
I feel good. You're making me
so
feel
funny.
good. And we emanate things, it comes across in our voice. You've heard people, when you actually listen to them, you're like, oh, they've had trauma.
Mm-hmm.
You can hear it in their voice.
Yeah.
So singing, no different. This is the mechanism by which one of the primary that we express ourselves. The character thing is really interesting. The question came up, what about people that have no talent and they're not very likable? Who are they? Fundamental religion. Fundamentalists, right? Very judgmental, very ethical, but they're constantly judging. They're reciting rote scripture. They don't really understand it. It's just they are damning, not likable, but they're always going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily have any darn talent. Anyway, with each one of these, for example, with the people that have all the talent in the world, but no character, no drive, and not very likable either.
Yeah.
You might find these people playing alone, or not playing at all. Maybe they just play in their room to themselves.
There's a lot of the people who have really incredible talent, and they even are a likable person, but what they're missing in their character part has to do with shame and unworthy. Who am I? We're in the middle of a course right now. We're teaching through Cognomovement, where we're moving through those levels and removing them. And a part of shame is, who do you think you are? Who do I think I am, that I would be famous, or that I would put myself on the stage? So some of the biggest talents in the world are hidden from us because of this piece, because they can't get above that predominant feeling in their body of, I'm really not worthy of doing that. It's a terrible shame. And so it's your goal and mine, Bill, to have every person who can hear our voice clear that out of their body so that they can reach their maximum potential. It's so important. We need these talents to shine, the people who really have the talent, right? To get out there and be who they came to the planet to be. And that means teachers. That means athletes. That means healers, speakers, authors, anybody who has the ability to change or to influence other people in a positive way. We need you out there. And we need this piece of character called shame and unworthy to be deleted and eradicated so that you can shine. So, Bill, I can't believe it, but we have reached the end of this episode for this week. It's been a really, really good one. Thanks for bringing up the topic. We want everybody out there who is hearing us to know that if you're somebody who's struggling with getting out there and doing what you came to the planet to be, to come to our website, cognomovement.com, and go to, it'll say start here. It's called Essentials. And it's these essential things that will help you harmonize your brain, clear out the basement of those emotions that are really speaking for you, to become more physically well and harmonized and balanced and strong. This little essentials program, and it's not long, is really so, so powerful. So we want to help you get out there. Come and get the essentials program, join our community, get started. The whole world will open up for you. Any last statements, Bill?
If you find anywhere that this resonated, that was lacking for you, don't accept it. There's something you can do about it. Cognomovement.com.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good one, Bill. All right, you guys, until next week, be safe and be well. We'll see y'all again really, really soon.